Thank you again for joining today's webinar, How to Elevate Your Investigations Program by Addressing Common Gaps. I'd now like to welcome and introduce today's speakers, Noella Bertrand, Security Director of Risk Management at ArcField. Also joining today is Farhad Tajali, Director of Global Security Systems and Data Analytics at Creative Artists Agencies, or CAA. Adrienne Galbrecht, Team Lead of Strategic Intelligence Services at ONTIC. And today's moderator is Cindy Marble, Senior Director, Threat Assessment Management Operations at ONTIC. So Cindy will not be turning on her camera today. We're preserving her internet strength, and we need you to hear her rather than see her. So with that, I'll hand things over to Cindy.
All right, thank you so much, Raquel, and welcome to all of our participants and to our panelists. We really appreciate you joining us today. For some of y'all here, you are seasoned investigators with fully functioning investigations programs. Others are just starting out, just starting to develop their programs, and some are somewhere in between. So with that, what we want to do is just have you take a quick poll that I've got up on the screen right now so the panelists and I can get an idea of where you are in your program. All right, so as you can see, 15.6% don't have one yet, and 13 are just starting to build out. All right, so we're at 28, 29% that are just kind of in the beginning stages. Ours is working okay, but we have some issues, 40%. And then we've got 20%, 21% that are running like a fine-tuned machine, which is fantastic. And hopefully, we can get some collaboration going on between those that are running really well and those that need some help. So that's good to know, and we'd love to hear your insights as well. All right, let's get started with our conversation today. What we're looking at and why we're here is because we've been hearing some key challenges from security leaders. But what we've also want to talk about is how they've overcome these challenges, which is why we have our panelists here today, and how they move their programs forward. So let's look at some of those challenges. Things are rolling along, your investigations program is working, or you're trying to get it set up, and then all of a sudden something appears that you weren't anticipating. Now you have a mandate. What you're seeing on this slide is something that is impacting just about everyone in the US. I know a lot of you that are joining us today are intimately familiar with California Senate Bill 553. As of July 1 of this year, so this month, most California employers, with few exceptions, have had to establish and put in motion a workplace violence prevention plan with policies and procedures that meet the bill requirements. This includes detailing who will investigate incidents and how those investigations will be conducted. But even if SB 553 doesn't affect you, as you can see from the slide, some type of workplace violence prevention plan with those investigative requirements is probably going to be coming your way soon. As of November of 2023, 11 states have enacted legislation requiring the workplace violence prevention programs, most of that centering around healthcare industry, and 27 states have proposed over 100 pieces of legislation regarding workplace violence. New York State being one of them that focuses more on retail violence in the investigations that need to take place with those types of incidents. So I think we can be pretty sure that at some point, most states will have a requirement, which is going to mean most organizations are going to have a requirement to have an investigations program that focuses on workplace violence. Another challenge that we're facing, particularly this year, are issues that arise from presidential elections. Anytime we have a presidential election or even a midterm election, we're going to have problems, whether it's coming internally or externally. There's always been political discourse, but I think we can all agree that we're at a whole different level now. And as I said, it's not only challenges that we face internally, whether it's simple disagreements among employees that escalate into bad behavior that needs to be investigated, or employees who are actually fearful of another employee just because of their political beliefs. But there are also challenges that come from the outside, those external threats that come about due to a political stance that possibly someone in our leadership has taken, or an inadvertent social media post that goes out from a company website that causes there to be threats that are coming from external entities that we have to investigate and have to look into. All of this is at best a minor disruption. At worst, it can be something tragic, so something that actually does need to be investigated. Regardless, security is going to wind up investigating and also have the responsibility of managing it. Third challenge we face, and something that we hear often from the folks that we speak to in the industry, is determining who owns it and exactly what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Creating clear areas of responsibility, defining what will be investigated, who will do the investigation, and how those investigations will be conducted is critical. With so many demands coming from different places, it's best to actually sit down and identify exactly your areas of concern and your areas of responsibility, and what belongs to your function in investigations and what belongs to another function in your organization. It's important to define what you protect. Again, getting this down on paper, stating exactly what your area of responsibility is. We look at protecting our employees. That's comes with that workplace violence prevention piece. But we also have our leadership that we protect, and we're including executive protection in there, our systems, insider threat, IT, and protecting the brand. It's not only important to define what you protect, but who the protectors are. We need to know whose responsibility it is. And oftentimes, security owns the responsibility of protecting or investigating. But it's important that we bring others to the table, that we collaborate with other functions. Bringing in our counterparts from human resources or people, legal, employee relations, IT folks, and even local law enforcement creates a team that brings in different perspectives, access to resources that we might not have, and helps us to create management strategies so that the burden isn't solely on security and safety. Now that we've talked about the challenges, let's talk about some solutions. How do we go about taking our investigations programs to the next level? First, let's get the bases covered. Let's look where the gaps are in coverage might be and fill them. A good way to go about this is to look at not only our security policies, but policies that have to deal with employee conduct, behavior, our physical and technical security policies and processes. We want to ensure alignment with executive protection policies and procedures, as well as our emergency operations procedures in illness and injury prevention, some of those OSHA-related policies. It's critical for all our policies that all of our policies are in alignment and that they don't contradict each other. From there, let's figure out how to get there. Let's create an investigative process roadmap. How are you going to receive information? How reports will be handled? Do you have a threshold for what is investigated by your department or what is sent somewhere else? Possibly this is where you establish a triage process. And very importantly, define how information is documented and who has access to that information. I can't stress the documentation piece enough. We really need to make sure that the work that we do is we are able to show in the future. One other piece to consider when we talk about documentation is communication to our employees. We do the work as investigators, but there has to be a closing the loop or closing the gap with employees, especially if a concern comes from an employee. There has to be a mechanism and a process as to how we communicate back to them that the issue has been resolved. Okay, so we've talked about some things and talked about the gaps. Let's take another poll. Think about what gaps your organization is currently looking to address in an investigations program. Breaking down silos, identifying how and when to escalate threats, communicating these threats, whether it's to the C-suite or to employees. Perhaps you're looking to implement a software to keep research and investigations in place, or other. All right, so the winner in this poll, and I'm not surprised, is breaking down silos. And that truly is one of the most critical pieces in creating not only a robust investigations program, but one that truly is fully functional. Is we cannot have those silos. There's got to be clear lines of communication. I'm not surprised at these numbers at all. Almost 26% of identifying how and when to escalate threats. That is one of the things that people get stuck on. And as I mentioned, maybe possibly creating that triage process, asking, 5 to 10 key questions that let you know and give you an informed decision on how you escalate those threats. 28% implementing a software process to keep research and investigations in one place. Piece, that research, when you have the ability to have your research in one place and that research is documented, you have the ability to show your work, and actually gives you that defensible stance if you're asked, what did you do about a situation? So being able to have that in one place with a software capability takes you to that next level to be able to, again, like I said, have that defensible process and really to be able to do a thorough job. All right, great job on that poll. We have one more before we get to our panelists. How do you manage cases today? A, we've pieced together a system using email, spreadsheets, documents, etc. B, we're repurposing existing tools like Jira, Asana, Salesforce. C, we have a case management tool built for security teams. Or D, NA. Okay, so the winner in this one is a case management tool built for security teams. Fantastic. I'm not surprised about the runner-up, 34.8%. We've pieced together a system using email, spreadsheets, documents, et cetera. It's a lot of what we hear. People are trying to utilize what they have. Repurposing existing tools like Jira, Asana, Salesforce is only 9.4%. So again, that using a case management tool built for security teams, built for security leaders, really is the way to go with keeping these things together, being able to have ease of use, ease of access, and that defensible process. So fantastic. I know we've gone through a lot, just now pretty quickly. We do have some articles that are here that you can access directly from the webinar platform that address a little bit more in depth what we've talked about. We recently released an article on the challenges with homegrown case management tools. Like we see some of the folks, 34.8%, that are kind of piecing some things together, as well as articles that include strategies to help you tackle your planning to address SB 553, the upcoming election, and others. So if you want to take a look at those, they're linked directly to the webinar here today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adrian and to our panelists so they can reflect on some of the challenges they've faced and the challenges that they've overcome and how they've elevated their investigations program. Adrian?
Thanks, Cindy. So for our first question, please share your background and a little about your investigations program at your organization. Farhad, can I start with you?
Of course. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm with Creative Artists Agency. This is one of my favorite topics, investigations and case management. We're a relatively new safety and security program here at CAA, including many of our applications and tools such as ONTIC that we use for incident and case management. One of the areas of focus has been for us was standardizing incidents and case management documentation and workflow. As new team members joined our program, we recognized people were documenting incidents and cases a bit differently in ONTIC, as people have varying experiences and skill levels, of course, in terms of documentation and where they've worked and experience in investigations. So in order to standardize the process and investigations and incidents, we created an investigations case management workflow. This case management workflow is a standard, more of a SOP or standard operating procedures on the various aspects of investigations, what elements are included in both an incident and an investigation, evidence management, how are persons of interest, victim, witnesses, how are they identified? For example, in ONTIC, we use entities for persons of interest, or we use principals for assets. So, and depending on your case management systems, all of these things could be slightly different. So this would be a guide for your team. So that was a critical step for us to get everyone on the same page, set expectations, standardize our documentation process, and create a guideline to help our team, as well as the future team members that will join us at some point. So this approach, this standardization helped us with data collection as well, data analysis, link analysis between incidents and cases, and parties involved. And the ultimate goal for us with collection of this information is to collect the right data for a security metrics program. This will inform our decision-making and management of risk and threats that are facing the organization. If you're not collecting the right data, you're not telling your story, and you're actually telling the wrong story to your executives. And executives want to know that information, right? They want to understand the risk. So these are some of the things we've done specifically with this case management workflow to help us standardize.
Thanks. I think you bring up some really great points in there. Specifically, what it makes me think of is the ability to scale. Having those workflows and those kind of SOPs in the background that are driving your metrics allows, as your team gets busier and busier, you can grow with it, and it makes it much more manageable. So thank you. I think those were great insights. Noella?
Yeah, I'm Noella Bertrand. I am the Security Director for Risk Management for Arcfield. We are a defense contractor with more than 65 years of experience supporting various U.S. intelligence community customers, Department of Defense, and several federal and civilian agencies. One of the things that kind of helped us from the starting point, we divested from Peraton 3 years ago, so we were able to start from the ground. We put ONTIC in place at the very beginning, and we created our team at the very beginning. One of the things, the benefits of being a defense contractor is that we have employees that are cleared at various clearance levels to support the contracts that we have, because the majority of our contracts are classified. So we have the benefit of the government vetting program already in place, but that doesn't catch everything. And our risk program is built around regulations that are levied by the government to require us to put insider threat programs in place. So we have to do this. We don't have a choice. So that kind of sets us apart a little bit. So we designed our program around enabling our team to populate and gather information from a centralized location, and we use ONTIC as that backbone. For case management, it's a huge benefit for us, but it's not the only tool that we use. We use several tools in our toolbox to do our threat assessment risk management pieces. But the solution that we put in place, because we were able to build it from the ground up, we provide our executive level team the confidence that we have a robust insider threat program in place, that it's effective, and that the tools that we have provide a centralized case management program for all of our stakeholders. The biggest part of our team is that it is from the top down. So our team is built up of executive level personnel, like the chief legal officer, chief human resources officer, our chief security officer, and our security officer. Those are the four big components of our team, but ultimate responsibility of how the team is effective and how we operate sits at the CEO's desk. And that's
Thanks,
a big plus for us.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think a lot of teams are hungry for that seat at the table. So I think it's incredible that you have that already, kind of a foot in the door at the executive level is so huge for so many teams that I talk to. And just to introduce myself, as Raquel said, my name's Adrienne Galbrecht. I am part of ONTIC's Strategic Intelligence Services team. I've had a unique opportunity in that position to work with clients across different verticals and at different stages in the evolution of their investigations program. So I like the poll kind of as an analyst, love seeing the distribution where everybody's at a little bit of a different spot, but we can all learn from each other, which is great. Prior to coming to ONTIC, I had over a decade in law enforcement, primarily as a crime and intelligence analyst. And I'm really grateful to be able to take my experience from the public sector investigation side and apply it to my work today. Rather than speak to one specific program, I plan to bring insights today on the themes I've seen across clients. It's such a timely topic. You know, how can I elevate my program? How can I identify gaps and mitigate those? So I'm excited to kind of share what I've seen across the space as well. So let's move on to our second question. Farhad and Noella, what are some common weak points that you've noticed in investigations programs, and how have those been addressed?
I can go first. Just like the participants here stated on the poll a few minutes ago, data silos have been a critical weakness that I've seen. On one of my previous experiences, I worked on implementation of incident management and case management systems across this one particular organization. So I met with a lot of great security teams as I was traveling around throughout the implementation. What I found along the way was that the corporate security teams and the investigators for the same organization, they documented their incidents and investigations in various different systems. Some even used emails. They had full-blown incidents and investigations written in emails that was shared amongst people. That brings a huge liability for your company. If you put this stuff in the email right now, you need to stop immediately. You have no control over where these emails end up and who's sharing them with whom, right? So many of the investigators or the incidents stemmed from incidents that were documented in some other place by some other team. So they lived in silos. It was a classic case of failure in cross-case analysis. There was no analysis across multiple cases or incidents because it was difficult when the data was stored in somewhere else, was in a different system, right? So if there was any insight that could be gained from comparing patterns or trends across different cases, the insight was missed or delayed. So in comparison, a platform that is a one-stop shop that has an incident module, case management module, similar to what we use with ONTIC today, can help across those silos. The issue also creates problem with your security metrics program. Again, I'm going to keep taking this back to a metrics program and data analysis. If you're not gathering the right information, you're not collecting the right data, you're going to report bad information. Your executives want visibility. They want to understand the risk with your incidents, your investigations, and the data you collect directly impacts the level of risk and the threats being presented or is being faced by the organization. So you have to be able to tell a clear story of your risk, and starts with your documentation, incidents, investigations, right? Another weakness that I've seen in training and user engagement. So training your people is also a huge part of this. So they feel comfortable, they have enough confidence in using your system effectively. For example, if there is a lack of engagement with your case management system, the data collection is not going to happen. If there is a lack of performance, most likely is related to knowledge, motivation, or organizational barriers. The KMO model is a gap analysis model in performance gaps. So commonly used in the education field, but as I experienced during the implementations, the more training we provide our security teams and investigators, the more engaged they became, and they had more confidence in using the system, right? So you can't just deploy a system and put it in front of people. There has to be enough support that goes behind that. So that was one of the biggest weaknesses that I had seen during that process.
Farhad, can I dig a little bit more on that lack of engagement? How crucial would you say it is to identify like which barrier it is and eliminate those early on in the process?
Yeah, so I mean, with implementations, typically when there is a change in the user's environment, they may resist the change. And the reason why they're resisting it is because they don't understand it, or they don't understand the value behind it, right? So it goes back to the implementation, how it was introduced, how it was brought to that environment. So one way you can see the user engagement is minimal is when you read the incidents and investigations is missing specific important elements or components to that incident, right? So for example, specific elements that are required in an incident report, they're all blank or missed, or even some of the elements in an investigation. So the narrative of the report could be, 3 sentences versus, a full-on investigative narrative and description. So you can tell the engagement is not there, and you're missing those specific elements and data that you need. So when you see that, I think it's time to have that conversation and go back and see what are some of those common gaps. Is it related to knowledge? Do they need more training? Are they not motivated to even use the system, and they rather go back to the email or whatever spreadsheet they were using before? Or is it some sort of a organizational barrier? Maybe there isn't enough support from higher ups. Maybe the leadership don't see this system as a value that or brings value to the organization. So those are some of the areas that you can go back and check.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Noella, what are your thoughts on some of the common weak points and how you've addressed them?
You can have some of the best case management systems out there to run your documentation. But if your teams aren't communicating and sharing data, so those siloed organizations are a big debilitator for a lot of teams. You're not going to get a full picture of your person of interest. And that's really what you want. You want the whole person case file, not just a snapshot in time. And those siloed organizations, HR, IT, legal, they have the data that you need to put that picture in place. But if you're not sharing that data and you're not communicating with those organizations, you are going to lose a big part of the data that you need to do a proper threat assessment. And I've seen it repeatedly through industry, time and time again, where data is king. And if you're holding that data, then you're in charge. But if you are holding that data in an incident where you need to be sharing it, like a workplace violence incident, where HR may be running a case on a particular individual and security may have a case running parallel with that. Those two teams really need to be talking, because a lot of that data helps paint the picture of what you need to do in order to put a mitigation plan in place before something bad happens. So that's a big piece of it.
When it comes to sharing the data, do you think, or in your experience, is it useful to have those other teams, maybe HR, also having access to your kind of one-stop shop for where you're housing all this, or is it more like in a briefing format?
It's a little bit of both. Relationship building is really key, but it's also having that centralized case management system that allows each of the interested parties, whether it be security, HR, legal, or the CISO office, to have access to the data and be able to put data into the case file. So a lot of times if we have to pull UAM information on a particular person of interest, our CISO has access to our case management system that when she pulls her files and her reports, she can go ahead and just upload that data directly into the case management system so that we're notified when any new information comes in, and we can go in and do a review of that data and see how it impacts our mitigation plan and if we need to adjust or change. So yeah, it's a big deal that they have the ability to not just view the data regularly, but to go ahead and add updates to it as well.
Perfect, thank you. The themes I've seen across clients really echo what both of you have said, and it comes down to those siloed tools and teams. So many investigation teams are small and mighty, in size for these big organizations. So the ability to break down the silos and streamlined workflow saves time and fosters collaboration between teams, just like you're talking about, Noella. So a specific example that comes to mind is from a team that was relatively new to their organization, and had a lot of responsibilities. Sometimes when you're the first, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, you get everything until it can grow and get split out. And so by consolidating their case management needs and research tools, they were able to more accurately track and action their investigative efforts. So they were then able to add kind of a proactive lens through things like OSINT monitoring. And as they continued maturing as a team, they then started really focusing on, Farhad, like what you're talking about, those metrics. Let me tell the story of what my team is doing, because a lot of times when we do our jobs really well, it looks like nothing's happening. So let me show the value to the organization, the wins they're seeing, and ultimately they made a case for more personnel through those metrics and kind of, elevating their visibility within their organization. So if they'd been stuck at that initial scrambling phase before consolidating, they probably never would have had a chance to really focus on those things and, kind of come to the next level. So now let's move a little bit, kind of shift and talk about strategies. So if you could share your strategies for strengthening your organization against challenges, like the upcoming US election and SB 553. Noella, can I pass it to you first?
Sure. So we are monitoring the election right now as an entity within ONTIC. We're monitoring it as an event, and we're gathering data around our principals, which are our sites and our locations, and where we have protest activity that may be within a certain radius of any particular site that we have. Any of the locations where there's information that may be targeting them, if it's protest activity or the fact that we're a defense contractor, they're connecting us to the war in Israel and the Ukraine right now. We're creating a threat assessment around the potential impact to our company in regards to election activity, the war in Israel. We're looking at war case data as well. Like I said, we are monitoring both of them. And we're building profiles on threat actors that may be targeting us because we are supporting those efforts. We also have some internal conversations around how we frame how we're supporting things like the war in Israel, where we have a very diverse workforce, and we embrace that. But we have to frame how we're supporting things like the war in Israel in regards to employees that may have different opinions. If you're supporting Israel versus supporting Palestine, if you're a Democrat versus Republican. I mean, years ago, political beliefs really didn't have a huge impact in our threat assessments, and we didn't look at that particular profile of an employee if they were a Democrat or a Republican or their religious beliefs. But because of today's times and the impact that the election is having just on our surroundings, we do have to actually take that into consideration. But we do have to be sensitive on how we address that with our workforce because of the diversity that we have. So it's a very, very thin line that we have to walk, but we're able to do it through effective threat assessments and effective case management with our entire team. And we communicate that information up to our ELT and our communications team as they go forward.
Perfect. Farhad, what are your thoughts?
We've done something similar as Noella mentioned. We've identified all of our assets as principals. In ONTIC, we've built a very good portfolio of all of our assets using the principal option, and everything related to our sites or live in that one centralized place. In terms of preparing for SB 553. Case management, incident management system plays a big role in that. So similarly, what we've done is we've prepared our incident types, investigative types for those types that would be identified as a workplace violence. There are specific elements that are required, obviously workplace violence type, detailed description of the incident, circumstances, who was involved. All of those are built as fields within our incidents and investigations to be able to not only capture that data, but then there's also a mandated requirement to provide a log, workplace violence log when requested, which we've looking to build in OnTix metrics dashboard. So we will be able to pull that information immediately and build that log so we can provide it when it's required. So all of those things have helped us to kind of prepare for this SB 553 mandate. And as these incidents, take place, we'll be able to collect that data and provide the log when needed.
Perfect. Yeah, amongst my clients, there's been a lot of interest around the elections, both for protest activity around client locations and also targeting of ELT members who may be more outspoken on political topics, regardless of the side. So a lot of them have seen success in proactively monitoring for threats, particularly when they have those SOPs that we've talked about several times now on how to triage the signals. How do you know when to escalate them? Depending on your organization and how your investigation team works, you might be part of that process, or it could be handled at a CSOC or GSOC level where they're intaking some of those and then deciding where to triage it. So either way, really the takeaway I'd say strategy-wise is being proactive as a team and organization with clear guidelines around how to triage information for those incidents coming in. Our next question, are there any success stories where these strategies have been effectively implemented for you all? And I'll just open it, whoever wants to go first.
Managing risk doesn't always have to have a negative outcome. Like if you have a threat mitigation strategy and you're always, well, let's just fire them and get them out of the company so we don't have to deal with them anymore. That's not necessarily our end goal. Our goal as a mitigation team and how we look at risk is to provide resources to our employees that may be in crisis. Sometimes you have to determine whether or not the employee is just having a bad day, or if they're actually in crisis and there's more underlying issues going on that's creating the type of environment that we're having to look at. We ultimately want to get that person back on track and so that they can be a productive member of our team. Our employees are very highly educated, highly experienced people, and they're not easy to replace at times. So if they're in crisis, our goal as a risk assessment team is to get them back on track and provide them with resources to help them. And the big deal there is our managers. Having our managers engaged is often the difference between the process going forward or the employee continuing to downward spiral and not able to put them back on track to where they're productive and continue to be a part of our team. It's never easy for us to make those types of decisions to either go with a more aggressive mitigation strategy or whether we provide a soft landing where we provide assistance and resources to the employee to kind of help get them back in place, and how long we're going to spend providing those resources to that particular person. When an employee is in crisis, it's hard for us to balance that. So it's really important that we're cognizant, if I could talk today, that sometimes a soft approach is better. And that it treats them with dignity and respect, and it makes all the difference. I mean, we've had really good success stories where we've had employees in crisis, and just having the manager there to engage and providing resources and letting them know that we're there to help, that we care about them and we want to help them, makes all the difference. And it really is important to be able to treat the employee with dignity and respect while you're dealing with the fact that they're going through a ton of different things in their life right now that's putting them in a crisis.
Absolutely. You bring up great points. And I think that highlighting that, managing risk doesn't always have a negative outcome is a really important thing to talk about. So thank you so much for bringing it up. Farhad, what about your success stories with the strategies?
Yeah, for us, as I mentioned, combining incidents and investigations into one platform has been a huge success for us. We have a macro picture of what we're dealing with and the risk level, building a person of interest database stemming from those incidents and investigations, keeping track of metrics, how many incidents are we experiencing from a month-to-month and an annual basis, how many investigations, what type of incidents are we dealing with, Also, joint training has been critical for us with the security teams, investigators, and other stakeholders to break down silos. And lastly, I want to talk about something that's really important. Your relationship with your federal and local law enforcement goes very, very far. We have a great relationship with a number of federal partners and local police departments where our assets are, so we can quickly get support if those incidents or investigations kind of fall into some sort of a criminal, process, so we can get them engaged quickly. But meeting with them, knowing them, and engaging them on a monthly basis, recurring basis, it really pays dividend.
Absolutely. That idea of the multidisciplinary team using those partners, I think, is crucial. I've been fortunate to see lots of successes and learning opportunities over with the clients that I've worked with. The investigation programs I think of as kind of gold standard have leveled up their games through strategies like consolidating tools, breaking down those silos so they can leverage and share information between those partners and teams like y'all are talking about. And have found ways to streamline and automate processes so they can focus more on their investigative efforts and less on kind of that background. So that helps them scale not only as an investigations team, but as a larger part of their security organization. Now, clearly that doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of hard work, dedication, and really a vision for what your team's North Star looks like. So to me, it also highlights the depth of knowledge and experience within the security sector itself. Like we saw in the polls just a little earlier, there are people out there who, their teams are well-oiled machines. Some are working to get there, but we have that knowledge. And the more that we can network through organizations like ASIS or ARIP and others, sharing what works, and sometimes even more importantly, what doesn't work, and what we've learned, the more we can really help elevate each other and the programs we're involved in. I'm going to turn it back over to Cindy now, because that kind of concludes our question and answer session for the panelists. So she can talk through a little bit more and then get to some audience Q&A.
All right. Thank you, Adrienne. Awesome job, panelists. Such great information. As I mentioned earlier, we do have resources that are attached to this platform here today. Just some resources that can help you enhance your investigations programs. Again, you can access them through here, or if you'd like us to send them to you, we can do that as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Raquel for the Q&A.
So we have just a few questions here. So I'll go ahead and dive in, and we'll do this round robin style. So what are some key indicators that an investigation program needs improvement? Farhad, would you like to kick this off?
Sure. So, I mean, again, going back to metrics, when you run your reports, when you look at your analytics, I think you can tell a lot about your investigations program, your security program overall, and how your team members are documenting your investigation and incidents. For example, if you look at your metrics, and maybe one person in the team is always creating investigations without any incidents, and someone else is always creating incidents without investigations, that is a red flag. Every investigation should have a stemming incident from it, right? Some incidents turn into an investigation depending what type of work and research and things that are behind that incident that needs to be done. But that would be one red flag that you can see that people are not in sync, and they're kind of going about creating and documenting incidents and investigation kind of on their own. So again, looking at your metrics program, looking at your data, looking at your graphs, I think tells a lot and gives you a big picture on what's going on within your program.
All right. Would anyone else like to add?
I was going to jump in and add, I think, and it's pretty obvious, but if you feel as a team like you're a hamster on that wheel, or just go, 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 you can't, take a second and step back and look at the bigger picture. I think that's a really good flag, because typically it means you're using a whole bunch of disparate systems, which can be hard to manage, ensuring everybody's doing things the same way and things like that. So if you feel like you're just drowning all the time, that's a really good indicator that maybe it's time to reevaluate kind of those workflows and things to see where you can give yourself some space.
Yeah, I was going to add to what Cindy said, that if you feel like you're being more reactive than proactive, where you have your incident case numbers are way up there, and you're not able to mitigate something before it becomes an incident, could be a huge indicator that you need to take a step back and look at your program. If you get reports coming in that you're not able to cut off at the pass and mitigate, and they turn into incidents that you have to, if they could be workplace violence incidents, things like that, that you have to react to, those are big indicators too. And unfortunately, teams sometimes do not get the attention that they need until an incident happens that they have to react to, that creates legal response or law enforcement response or media response. But then you have about a 5.2 second window to jump on that incident to be able to get the program resources that you need before they move on to something else.
All right, thank you, Noella. All right, let's squeeze in one last question. Do you have a triage process to determine when to take action on your investigations?
We have a process in place that's documented, where if we have a report come into our team, there's an initial meeting with all of the key stakeholders, and then we determine where we go forward from there, whether it is to assign further actions to go get more data. We also do our OSINT research at that point in time. We use ONTIC for a lot of that. We gather our person of interest picture, and then we come back together as a team with all of the data that we have put into the case management system, and then we build a briefing around that to determine what our next steps are going to be, whether it be engage with law enforcement, engage with the managers, or engage with the employee directly.
And would anyone else like to add?
And for us, we have a similar process. Our case management workflow really informs the investigation process as well. Certain incidents, they always would end up in some sort of an investigation upon doing the initial incident. Others, we have weekly stand-ups where we discuss investigations, POIs, and then threats and risks that are being faced by the organization. So those also kind of help guide the investigation process. But we're approaching that from a team-based approach where people have time to chime in and then review the overall incident and the scope of the incident and determine the next steps.